Netroots UK to have Owen, one of the main speakers of today's plenary session, to talk to us about digital issues. Owen, maybe for people who are not here today, can you maybe give a brief overview of what you talked about?
Well, for me, it was about the centrality of social media for people on the left-wing movements, progressives, in an environment where the mainstream press is very hostile often to the sorts of things we're passionate about. The mainstream press is institutionally hostile to threats to the status quo that it's part of, to working people fighting for their rights, to alternatives to the way the world is structured. And what social media can do is provide a platform for those ideas. It can give a platform for voices which are otherwise airbrushed out of existence. So, for example, whether it be disabled people having their benefits taken away, the plight of the unemployed, young people who are facing a hammering because of this crisis. And social media, Twitter, videos, blogs can break open and create space which the mainstream press won't provide. And for me, I think at a time when people are being made to pay for a crisis they had nothing to do with, social media can provide a platform that otherwise just wouldn't exist.
When we say social media, and obviously Twitter is a big part of this, we have lots of people ranting and trying to protest against this coverage. They don't find themselves their beliefs and their opinions in it. How can we get something actually to happen to build on it, not only ranting but also building on this space?
In terms of the relationship between people online and kind of real world activism, well, I mean, that's really important, because I think the danger is people become the sum of their own avatars. They kind of, clicktivism, you just click on something and then, on a petition or something, and you think that's your contribution to political struggle. And I think what's really important is to link online activists, what people are doing online, with real world struggles in the workplace, in the street, whether it be students. I mean, we had that with various campaigns of student protests, linked to their struggles to using Twitter, blogs and so on, YouTube, and the occupations did as well. UK Uncut, which got an issue like tax avoidance, which was just way out on the fringes. No one was interested in tax avoidance, and what they did is they forced that on the agenda using social media. It was the same with Occupy as well. So I think that bridge is really important. You can't just have online campaigns. They've got to be linked to real world struggles that are actually going out on the streets.
And as an observer of the activists and the campaigns around, we can say that You Can Cut and Occupy have been very active, but honestly, for the best or the worst, they're not on the center of the stage right now. Can you see the next step, the future of campaigns happening right now? Can you project the next steps?
It's difficult to project. I think what UK Uncut and Occupy did on their own terms is brilliant. It raised consciousness. I mean, Occupy reminded people who caused the crisis and who's been made to pay for the crisis. I was involved in numerous TV and radio debates afterwards where we were talking about capitalism, and the point I made is we wouldn't even be having this discussion if it wasn't for those protesters camped outside St Paul's Cathedral. But I do think that any new movement against austerity has to have a coherent political agenda and a coherent alternative. If you don't build a coherent alternative that resonates with people's experiences, then people end up feeling resigned to the way things are. That idea of there is no alternative, which the mainstream press and politicians hammer into people on a daily basis, that becomes something which isn't challenged. So we have to build a coherent alternative to give people the confidence to fight back.
You are from a union background. I mean, you're very attached to that idea, and unfortunately for that, we can see the unions all over Europe, less membership. And on the other side, a very strong activity of online participation to You Can Cut Occupy. How can we reconciliate these two aspects? Because we do need institutional organizations to actually transform this activism into proper change.
Well, I wouldn't overstate the case, because trade unions in this country, the biggest democratic mass movement in Britain, they represent over 6.5 million people, ranging from supermarket checkout workers.
It's going down in January.
Well, it's stagnating at the moment. It's still by far, as I say, the biggest democratic movement, with unique roots in working people's workplaces and communities, which no other movement does. And we still haven't got to a point where, their membership is 9 times bigger than all the other political parties put together. None of these movements have challenged them in terms of their sheer membership. But I do think we need a new form of trade unionism, what Unite, the biggest union in the country, are doing is recognising that work's become more transient. You've got lots of part-time workers, lots of temporary workers, casualisation. So you have to organise both in the workplace but also in the community. So Unite are looking at community organising. I think that's really important for trade unionism to start looking at, and also linking with other struggles and campaigns. Unions work very closely actually in Support UK and CUT, for example. They're very supportive of Occupy. They're doing different things, but that relationship's important. But I think, the unions have to get to grips with social media. But the key thing for unions is a new way of organising working people, because in the private sector only 14% of people are now unionised compared to over half in the public sector. We need a new model, but previous generations of trade unions have done that. In the 1880s it was mostly skilled workers who were unionised, and they went out, new unionism as it's called, recruited unskilled workers. In the 1930s, when car industry started expanding, people said we'll never be able to organise these people. They're sitting in rows, they can't communicate with each other. But they became one of the most organised sections of the British labour movement. So we need to organise call centres and supermarket workers and so on. That's the future of trade unionism. I think unions are already coming to grips with that now. We're beginning to.
Okay, thank you so much, Owen, for talking to us. You can see all these issues have been raised today at Netroots UK. Lots of videos on Vision on TV, plug and play, around these workshops and this discussion. Thank you for watching. This was Mark for Vision on TV.